Or did any of you dispute coming here tonight?
No, not a bit.
You felt you wanted to confront this?
Absolutely, it's time.
Is it difficult for you to sit in Steve's presence?
It's not pleasant. This man has harmed us deeply. He's failed in his responsibilities as a police officer. He's failed us. He's failed JonBenet. He's failed the community of Boulder. It's not pleasant, no.
Steve,
well,
how do you
let's talk about failure. Let's talk about parents who I feel have failed their daughter, who, after this became a homicide, of course they cooperated when it was a kidnapping, but after it became a homicide, Patsy, you waited 4 months before you came in and talked to the Boulder Police Department and answered questions.
No, Steve, I did not.
Well, tell me when. I was there every day. Tell me how many hours.
Were you in our home that day?
How many hours?
Were you in our home the day?
Let's read some
how many hours
press
did you
release.
spend?
Rather than talk over each other, you say they didn't appear. You say you did appear with the Boulder Police?
Yes, I did.
And how would he not know about
At the
it?
Boulder Police Department.
wasn't
I don't
there
remember
that
you
day.
there.
Oh, you weren't there. You weren't there the day they came.
What day did you
You
come
were
to the
not
Boulder
there.
Police Department?
Let's deal with facts. December 27th, 1997, Commander Eller released a press release. The family has been cooperative and our investigation is continuing. December 29th, 1996, the family continues...
96,
I meant
right?
96, sorry. The family continues to cooperate with the police investigation, although the police have not yet conducted interviews with the father and mother. They have been in no condition to be interviewed up to this point. We spent days with the police. We gave them everything they asked for.
So last time we left off kind of talking about Westworld's article with, I think, Alan Prendergast, which was updated November 30th of 2024. The name of the article is JonBenet Ramsey, How the Investigation Got Derailed and Why It Still Matters Today. And I think it was originally published in 2014 and updated in light of obviously the recent interest, and kind of walks through the early hours of December 26, 1996, the day JonBenet was reported missing, and the immediate actions taken by the Ramseys, their friends, and law enforcement. So yesterday, I broke down the early morning timeline of JonBenet's disappearance and why it kind of doesn't add up just a little bit. The Whites were supposedly called around 6 a.m. Other sources say 5:55. So a small gap that kind of makes somebody look at how the Ramseys move afterward. You know, if you think about the Vanity Fair article, Missing Innocence by Anne Louise Bardock, talking about people continuing to show up. And my question was, okay, if, according to the article, the Vanity Fair article, if Officer French shows up and he's looking at Patsy, and Patsy is kind of like looking at him through splayed fingers from the solarium, which is way over here, you know, which is essentially well across town. And I can bring that up. So here's the map of that, which essentially, if you can make it kind of bigger, Patsy is way over here. So Officer French comes through this door and he's in the foyer talking to John. And then Patsy, he sees excellent vision, looks over here, and Patsy's in here kind of, staring at him. You know, she's staring at him through splayed fingers and trying to remain secretive, according to Officer French, trying to remain secretive and undetected in wanting to understand his reactions. And so we've been kind of going through this article. I was looking at that, and the fact that felt more like a performance rather than a panic. And what really got me was the rush to call the FBI, but not through the police. And knowing that if John had contacts in the FBI, then we were wondering why he didn't call himself. And instead, though, Patsy tells her friend, Priscilla White, when she called her on the phone in the morning, she said, "Hey, call the FBI," and then she hung up, tells her to do it. And so kind of this, what I call go big, fast pattern, calling in the big guns, spending big money, acting fast, sort of matches how the Ramseys operate in other parts of their life. They don't do it small, they do it big. And so then there's this basement. John supposedly found JonBenet in 5 minutes. And then closer to the end of the video, I walked through the layout, through the clutter, the time it actually takes on video record, the time it actually takes. And sort of there's just no way that we can see that John stumbled on to JonBenet unless he went directly there. Based on everything that John said, we got down there, we looked at the window, or first of all, we got down there, we looked in other rooms. We got down there in front of the window, we looked for glass. We noticed this, we stood there and talked for a second. There's no way in 5 minutes you were coming back up the stairs. It's just not. So that to us, according to that, felt a little bit staged, is what we were calling it. And so everything they did in that light went immediately against the ransom note. And not calling the cops, not alerting others, and the contradictions that we found kind of tells you a lot. They did the exact opposite. And so their behavior, according to these sources, seems to suggest that there might be some staging. They're not totally innocent. And this is probably what you have when you're looking at terrified parents who don't know what to do. Don't know why you would stage, but anyways, I want to do a few housekeeping things, or I want to say something in terms of housekeeping for myself. I want to apologize for Carol. I think I had mentioned one of her theories that kind of closely aligned with mine. And I think I may have said something crazy, like I said it was crazy or something like that. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that it was crazy. So if I say crazy or something like that to you guys, that's just kind of how I talk. But I'll make sure that I watch that in the coming time. So I want to apologize. Actually, and she had a theory about the urine and everything and stuff like that, and I quite enjoyed it. So wanted to put some respect on her name in that aspect and give her flowers in that respect. I also want to say, we've been shouting out people from all over, man. I want to say, I don't know if I did this last video. I think I may have forgot, but I have the notes right here. Young lady from, or an individual from Liverpool. I did a quick glance. From what I can understand, individual from Liverpool was trying to listen to one of my videos. Liverpool, UK was trying to listen to one of my videos, and because of my, you know how I am, my soothing, calming voice, and it actually woke her up because of the content. So I appreciate that, man. That's very encouraging. And she was watching from UK. Somebody said, "What's up from Ireland?" Shout out to Ireland. I think my last name is Irish. Not even lying to you. And then my niece, her name is Ireland. So and my brother is really into the Irish culture. So that means a lot to me. And then shout out to Belgium, people watching from Belgium. Thank you so much. So if you're ever in the comments, just shout out where you're from. And if I run across it, I'll try to write it down and say what's up. And thank you for everybody internationally watching. So let's get to this. I've taken enough time. Let's get to this. We stopped, like I said, last time kind of talking about all those things. And where we ended up was, this is the wrong one. Okay, cool. I was like, why did it get so small? Where we ended up was kind of in the switch, as you saw a little bit, Detective Thomas allude to, where the kidnapping changed into a homicide. And I think if you go through some of the police reports, that's kind of where you start to see, even if it doesn't say it directly, you kind of start to see, now, wait a minute. The cops are writing down and they're saying, whoa, wait. What, this shouldn't be the case. And the cops get the cops get a bad rap for a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of things, of course, that we can agree that the cops missed in this JonBenet Ramsey case, but they get a bad rap for not calling people in, not calling in help. And the same records or the same police updates that John seems to not be aware of, those same updates, John is legitimately reading and acting like, other than what I want to read and pull out of this, that's nothing else matters to me, because they talked about a lot. But John highlights and focuses on the fact that, hey, we were in constant communication with the police and they knew that we were in no shape to come up there. But that wasn't Steve's point. Steve's point was, you guys didn't come in for 4 months, and they didn't. You guys didn't come in for 4 months. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about coming in to give hair and blood samples. We're talking about, and that's not interview stuff. We're talking about you guys coming in for interview stuff. And I think Mike Bynum kind of said, well, we thought it was crazy that this was happening, and we went in to talk to and they weren't going to release the body of JonBenet Ramsey unless they came in for interviews. And so basically, and Mike Bynum at the time, the lawyer friend, the corporate lawyer, I think from Access Graphics and Lockheed Martin, that was working with John, who had been somewhere else and was called over, he kind of went to bat for him, talking to the assistant DA, and I think called in the DA and said, hey, this is crazy. We need the body. I think Dr. Meyer said, hey, there's no reason why I continue to hold the body, but the body was taken as evidence. And so from there, from what I understand, the cops don't have to have any reason to release the body to you. They can hold that body as long as they need to investigate. The only reason, as I understand it, the only reason that they released that body, and I could be wrong, but the only reason that they released that body was out of politeness. And that's another level of police bungling, because that significantly hindered the investigation. And so we begin here with my notes. What began as a kidnapping case became a homicide investigation the moment John Ramsey discovered the lifeless body of his daughter wrapped in a blanket in the wine cellar, and then carried her upstairs, further contaminating an already problematic crime scene. My notes here kind of back that up. And what I wanted to point it out, the switch from external to internal came by the means of the homicide discovery. And so when we're wondering, and that's it's like an automatic switch. If we're wondering why the cops were paying attention, John is saying, oh, you guys never wanted to look at anybody else and this and that. I mean, because we're early in the investigation. Like, I don't understand that. I just don't understand what's hard to understand about that. We're early in the investigation. Like, this is day one. Why would we? And I guess John's point is, you guys should have moved on quickly. How would we move on quickly? We haven't talked to you at all. You came in. Where would they? Oh, it became pretty obvious early on that it got hostile. We haven't talked to you at all. What you're probably perceiving is people becoming a little bit more assertive. I don't want to say aggressive, but they're becoming a little bit more assertive and saying, hey, we need you to come in for an interview. Oh, and then you guys are, oh, no, we'll just do it when give us time. This is a homicide investigation. It's not like, hey, you called out for work, but we need to get your approval on these financial statements. Or, hey, you said you were going to, set up this party for us, and, you're not here. When can you come? Oh, my stomach ache, I got a little stomach bug today, and so I really don't want to come in. No, this is a homicide investigation. We need answers within the first 48 hours. Time is of the essence. Time is imperative here. We need to get answers. And instead of giving people answers, you guys ran to lawyers and rejected giving people the answers that they need. You did only what was required, and that was to give hair and blood samples. That's it. And the blood samples, from what I can see in the forensic reports, the blood samples from Patsy and John were good, but from Burke, his secretor status was inconclusive. It's hard to tell whether or not, and there's some issues I have with that. I'll just say that without going into depth. There's some issues I have with that. And so this discovery of JonBenet Ramsey threw out the kidnapping and moved it to the intruder at best. So it's no longer kidnapping. And so by deductive reasoning, it's no longer kidnapping. We got to throw that out. And the FBI said this too. We got to throw out the kidnapping angle. That's done. And now at best, we deal with an intruder is where we go. And so, but the FBI and the BPD, Boulder Police Department, can't get past the Ramseys because the level of closeness that they are to the crime scene. This intruder was essentially what I might call part human, part phantom. Because as we've discussed, they didn't leave anything at the crime scene that was legitimate. Part of and what I was looking at the other day, and was sort of a derivative of my analysis. I'm going to do some other analysis. I need to do an official write up for the report. Part of the derivative analysis was, if you look at JonBenét's underwear and how they were saying that there was like a little piece of DNA on one piece of it. Everywhere else, there was nothing. And I was like, well, come on. How is that? Who is this guy? Who are these two people? As they were saying, oh, it's got to be two people. Who are these two people then? Who are they wearing gloves? If they're wearing gloves, then there would be no DNA. But apparently not. If you can get a little bit of DNA collected from there and it's an unknown or unidentified male, then apparently they weren't wearing gloves. But somehow, some way, they didn't spread DNA anywhere else on her underwear. How? Make it make sense. And then the whole white man. So anything, this guy's a phantom. It makes it less believable because this individual was clearly, we can deduce that this individual was clearly not wearing any gloves. So if this individual was not wearing gloves, then they're not as careful as, and then they've not done this. We're looking for an individual who's not done this a lot. They've done this maybe a few times, but they've not done it enough to learn how to be thorough, how to be detailed, and how to pay attention to certain details, and how to be more elusive and efficient in their process of assaulting people. They've not yet figured that. They're still learning. We need to be looking for that person, but there's nobody. When you look through Boulder, Colorado, and you look at all of the P people, I call them the P people, the P files, you call them all through Colorado, can't match anybody. Go through the CODIS database, can't match anybody. It's none of these people. Everybody was in place. As we go through Colorado, we look at everybody. Nobody had nothing to do with anybody. And even if we look at Helgoth, if we go back to somebody, I'll just say somebody like him. They claim he was sneaking around at night and all such as that. And, he was kind of phantom-like. Yeah, but then when we found him, it was like a setup. The stuff was just like laying and the weapon was in the wrong hand. So that alone kind of makes you start to backtrack and say, you know what? I don't know if we can trust any of your investigators from the Ramsey squad, because it just seems like you're throwing random things out to us. The second point, for the whites, the question of who killed JonBenet or why the investigation stalled isn't simply fodder for a parlor game or online chatter. The case turned their lives upside down. Because of their close association with the Ramseys before the murder and what they saw in the days that followed, they emerged as key witnesses in the investigation. Initially, strong supporters of John and Patsy, there's absolutely no way it could be a family member, Priscilla told police in her first official interview. They eventually became highly critical of Hunter's handling of the case and what they perceived as the powerful influence being exerted by the Ramseys' well-connected attorneys. On this point, the whites initially thought John and Patsy, like a lot of people, they initially thought John and Patsy were innocent and had nothing to do with this until the lawyers got involved and started pointing fingers at everybody else, pointing fingers elsewhere. And that became a problem because when we're talking about two people who are in the inner circle, and are saying, I'm close to these people. We've been close to these people. We used to live a couple doors down from them. So our kids used to play with them all the time until we moved. I think as the article said, until we moved down the street, we were really close to them. I mean, only when we moved a little bit further away, maybe like 5 minutes away, we didn't see him as much. We were a little bit disconnected, but we still wanted to play, and we still had our kids come over and play, and we still sailed together, and it took a little bit more effort to make this friendship last, is essentially what it was. But what Fleet and Priscilla are saying, that we still know Patsy and John on a certain level. We were still there to support JonBenet and Burke in whatever. Our kids still played together. And so when I'm noticing something, I'm not going to touch that just yet. But anyways, when I'm noticing something, I make a statement about it because you're my friend. I think they said something to the effect of, and I think this article also touches on it. Priscilla was even helping the Ramseys or helping Patsy with her image before they got on CNN for the first interview. And, like we said, there's going to be some more go big behavior that kind of reflects people who struggle to read the room, I guess you could say. They struggle to read the room. They're so disconnected, it seems, from reality. They're so disconnected from reality that they don't even know. And that really goes toward naivete, because it's like, if you're going to go on TV in a mink coat and sunshades and somebody has to say you're supposed to be just for looks, just for optics, right? Why would you go on CNN and because this is your first, people have been kind of hearing rumblings about this whole thing with your daughter. You want to appear to the people lowly and humble. Why would you come looking like a movie star on CNN? It gives the impression that you're moving on with your life and, you're not really worried about your daughter. I mean, think about it. If you see a movie star in a big, like if you see a movie star couple, they're both, big in their own right. Let's say, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, and they're together for a long time, and then all of a sudden they break up or divorce or what have you, and you're looking for some sort of, brokenness in both parties, and you see the next week in Cancun, Brad is, with, a hot babe in the hot tub, with sunshades on, and they're just hugged up and all such as that. What are you going to think? And then, as well, you see Angelina, somewhere in Greece or something like that, hugged up with, a male model or something like that, sunshades and stuff like that. Guess what? You're going to be like, well, it looks like Angelina and Brad are moving on from their divorce or something like that. And it's going to seem like they're not really worried about it. And you're going to start asking questions. What about the kids? Who's watching the kids and things of that nature. Whereas if you see one of them broken up, then you're going to be like, well, they're still crying. They're still grieving from this divorce process. This has got to be hard on the family. This has got to be hard on the kids, and she's trying to, Angelina or Brad, they're trying to really get themselves together in the midst of this breakup. That's what you would think. That's the optics of it. That's just, there's nothing wrong with wearing a mink coat, obviously, but just the optics of it don't make sense. You want to be careful of that. But like I said, the naivete of that, and just saying, can I show up in sunshades and a mink coat? Was that okay? No. So they're still being a friend, and if I'm a true friend, as Priscilla and Fleet are trying to be, I'm going to point that out to you. And so the problem became when you got your attorneys involved, Fleet and Priscilla start looking at you sideways, because that's indicative of somebody trying to power through their feelings, even though they mentally they had already started to take a step back and say, I don't know about this. I don't like this. But you're telling me, and when you get into this space with somebody that you've trusted for so long, right? You get into the space to where I'm not trying to question your judgment, but it seems you've been feeling for the past couple weeks that we're in different spaces. We're not aligned anymore. And this shift feels different. It feels sort of life-changing, like friendship altering kind of shift. And you can't explain it. It's just a feeling that you get, that you're just like, man, we've not connected in so long. And, we connect every now and again, but every time we connect, it's like they're on some different stuff. Like, man, since I've talked to you, you guys have decided to, move out of your old house and you guys are thinking about moving to Hollywood. What's that all about? And their answer is like, oh, this person is, and I'm just kind of making up an example. Oh, my daughter or something like that. They've decided that they're into this, and so we want to move here. And the agents thought it would be good for her to do all of this stuff and blah 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 blah. And the person you're like sitting in front of them, like, it's like, I mean, it just kind of feels like you're going Hollywood on me, though. I mean, it just kind of feels like I understand that you're doing this for your daughter, but it just kind of feels like you're going Hollywood on us a little bit because, like, you're buying all this stuff, you're buying a new car, and from what I see, you're going to try to get into the bigger house, and I know that your money is not like that, so it just seems like you're kind of trying to show off a little bit, and I'm not sure that you need it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not in the Hollywood. I'm not in the movie industry. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think you have to do all that. I think you're losing a level of authenticity that is true to yourself. And they convince you otherwise. And, oh, no, we're not doing anything like that. It's just, me, it's whatever. But as soon as you see them move to Hollywood full time and you see them on TV, then it's like, yeah, we all know those stories to where people have switched up and changed, and you can go back to their friends, their old friends, and their old friends say, yeah, when they did this, it was the beginning of the end. This was the start of those problems when they got hooked on this or they couldn't, and then they had all these problems. And I know they were thrust into the spotlight this way, and they can't handle the spotlight in that way. And I had concerns for that, and I was trying to be a friend to them, and everything just goes left. And I kind of feel like that's where the space that Fleet White and Priscilla and the Ramseys were in a little bit. We're not seeing you as much. JonBenet is getting into more pageants. And so you're kind of, I feel like I kind of don't know you anymore. So when something like this happens, I still want to believe that you're the same John and Patsy, but it almost feels like you're not. And for a split second, and I know I shouldn't, this is kind of what Priscilla is saying in her mind. For a split second, and I know I shouldn't, when I get the call, I might kind of think of like this was bound to happen because there's been some weird stuff going on in this house, and I know I'm supposed to be there for my friend, but I haven't been feeling too connected to my friend lately. And the first thing that comes to my mind is like, for a split second, this is internal. This is something that the family did. But I come to my senses, and it's like I'm fighting myself, and I say, no, this is John and Patsy. I know John and Patsy. They would never let something like this happen on their watch. And then they get the lawyers, and it's like, oh man, I would think, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, and this is Fleet and Priscilla. I'm just kind of speculating what they might think. They might say, well, dang, I know John. I this is my cell buddy. I wouldn't think that he would get the lawyers to cover up for anything. If they get the lawyers, and I have to trust that this is for a good reason. But I think their fears were confirmed the longer and the longer this investigation went on. Their fears were confirmed about these are not the same Ramseys as I met several years back. They're different. And by that time, it's 2 or 3 years down the road, and JonBenet is not getting justice. That's what we're running into. We're 2 or 3 years down the road, JonBenet is not getting justice. And so many things have been lost, and that becomes a problem. So moving on to the next point. Meanwhile, the Ramseys received a highly unusual apology of exoneration from Hunter's successor, Mary Lacy, based on DNA evidence that now appears to be far less conclusive than Lacy claims. I write here that the article mentions how far less conclusive the DNA evidence is in stark contrast to what Mary Lacy claimed. This is a huge pickup in terms of intuition. Why do I say that? Is because originally when we were kind of looking through earlier on in the investigation, we were kind of looking through and doing research and trying to understand more about the DNA and stuff like that. We said, I'm not sure about this DNA. because we were dealing with things like the DNA was degraded and such as that. And so we start doing research and saying, well, if the DNA is degraded, how much of a how confident can you be, or if the DNA is in certain places, that doesn't indicate anything. How confident can you be? And they kept on trying to put it on the unknown, unidentified male, and that's heavily what's in John and Patsy's books. Oh, they found this, and but when you go and look at that, I'm not saying they're lying, but I'm saying when I go and look at the forensic evidence, when I go look at the test results on stuff, that I do not find what they're talking about. It is not as conclusive as John is trying to put in his book. I don't see the same thing. And that's what's crazy to me. And so that's a huge pickup in terms of intuition. Now, moving on to the next point. And this is going to kind of be a bit of an extensive read, because we might dive a little into the interviews on this. Some pundits have sought to dismiss the whites as obsessed with the Ramsey case and prone to complicated conspiracy theories about what went wrong. But the whites say they're trying to set the record straight. No easy task, when basic facts about the case have been buried under years of accumulated media spin and outright lies. The couple had to deal not only with the brutal murder of I think that's different. Okay, cool. Not only did they have to deal with the brutal murder of their daughter's best friend hours after they'd served JonBenet her last meal, but with the abrupt rupture of their close relationship with the girls' parents as the Ramseys retreated behind the wall of lawyers. So my notes say here, in all of this, Fleet and Priscilla won't overly involve themselves in the media. They're trying to stay out of the media. They're trying to keep themselves out of the media. They're saying, I'm not going to give a credence to this theory. I'm not going to give credence to that theory. I'm not going to get involved here. I'm not going to put myself in this position. Plenty of people are courting me, as we'll find out in the later on in the article. It goes on to say plenty of people are courting you, but I don't want to get involved with that. I just want to let the facts come out. So the couple had to deal not only with the brutal murder of their daughter's best friend hours after they served JonBenet her last meal, but with the abrupt rupture of their close relationship with the girl's parents as the Ramseys retreated behind a wall of lawyers. Here I have the article mentions her murder hours after they served JonBenet her last meal. And this is where I kind of go into the interviews, because Patsy Ramsey confirms that Priscilla made JonBenet a special plate of cracked crab. But Patsy says Priscilla did this for some reason. She said for some reason she did this. Basically, I don't know why she made her a plate of cracked crab. And then goes on to say that Priscilla was aware that JonBenet and Burke liked seafood. And so Patsy goes on to say that they nibbled on that for a little bit. But when asked about, the formal dinner and formal serving style, i.e. buffet style or whatever, Patsy gets a little bit hazy on the details. And so when you ask John about it, John says that Priscilla was making the plate, but isn't sure of cracked crab, but he wasn't sure if JonBenet ate any of it. But he admits that if JonBenet would have saw it or whatever, then JonBenet would have liked it, because Priscilla was aware of of JonBenet and Burke liking seafood. Key point here is that in 1997, I think the 1997 interview, Patsy Ramsey remembers JonBenet eating cracked crab, but she kind of remembers her eating that. She may have, we nibbled in that on that a little bit. But in the 1998 interview, she doesn't remember. But she says she initially thought that the gesture from Priscilla was nice for, basically for you to make my daughter a plate. Because we were talking about, and they went on to ask, was JonBenet hungry? Because I don't know if JonBenet ate for like hours. And from what I understand in the transcripts, the interview transcripts, I don't understand, and I can go back and look. I could be wrong. I don't understand Patsy to have fed the kids anything until they got to the party. After breakfast until they got to the party. I don't understand Patsy to have fed them anything. I can't imagine um, the kids just going out with going without food. I happen to think that it's possible that JonBenet and Burke, maybe went and got themselves something to eat. But that would become a problem if you said that JonBenet and Burke went and got themselves something to eat, because then you would admit, as they circled, they danced around that question. John specifically danced around that question. He said, "Can JonBenet get food for herself?" In one of the interviews, they were asking him that. I think it was with Lou Smith in 1998. They were asking him, "Can JonBenet get food for herself?" And what about Burke? And it's like, oh, I don't know. And it was in the context of being at the Christmas party, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And John was like, I don't know. They may have been able to go into the pantry, but I'm not sure if they can go in the refrigerator. And especially at home, JonBenet would have been afraid of the dark, so maybe she wouldn't have gone down there by herself and stuff like that. And so that's kind of his and I don't know. And he went on to say, I don't even know if JonBenet could reach the refrigerator and stuff like that. So it goes on to say that. And so just it kind of takes away the idea that JonBenet could have served herself a meal. And it doesn't really say that Burke can't do it for himself, which he should be able to. He's 9, almost 10, going on 10. It'll be 10 the following month. Burke should be able to do that. He should be able to do that. But you don't want to admit that. You don't want to say, well, my son might be able to feed himself, because the police will come back and say, well, if your son is able to feed himself and Fleet is telling us that he didn't serve any pineapple at the party, then isn't it possible that your son served himself some pineapples at home? And isn't it possible that he served your daughter some pineapples? John Ramsey can't admit that. So John has to do one of two things. He has to first deny, he has to do two things. He has to deny that, to deny that he's aware that Burke is independent to that level. He has to deny that, number one. Number two, he has to shove responsibility off to Fleet White's house and say JonBenet ate it at Fleet White's house. But it can't be the pineapple. So he has to take focus off of the pineapple. And so in doing so, he has to say, well, maybe it's not pineapple like you think. Maybe it's a fruit cocktail. And so now we got to go investigate the possibility that it's a fruit cocktail, which is fair. It's fair. It's a fruit cocktail. It is what it is. But the point being, if I can push this over and say the fruit cocktail was served at Fleet White's house, so that explains away that. But Lou stuck to it and said, no, that's a pineapple. We're certain. This is your friend, John. Said, we're certain that it's a pineapple. And so I guess going back to my point here, Patsy says she remembers the gesture. She thought it was initially nice, but now looking back at it, the fact that Priscilla mentions JonBenet by name, and this is what you said, the fact that Priscilla mentions JonBenet by name seems strange, is what Patsy said. It seems kind of strange. It seems kind of, and John and Patsy do this thing in interviews to where they say, that seems strange, right? And they kind of like, it's like they're almost looking at you. That seems strange that somebody would mention that, right? Doesn't it? And it's stuff that's not even strange. Like they're called like basic stuff. Like, hey, Priscilla told me that she was going to the store. She was going to Kroger to pick up some Kool-Aid pouches or some Kool-Aid drinks. And she said, hey, I'm picking up some stuff and you have a PTA you have to buy for the kids. The PTA has tasked you with going and picking up Kool-Aid coolers for the kids. And I know you haven't gone to the store. I can pick them up for you. And so you won't have to make that trip to the store. And John and Patsy might respond by saying, well, at first it seemed nice of her, but now looking back, it was kind of weird that she wanted to do that. Like maybe, and it's just like, This is what we talk about when we talk about sentences going nowhere, sentences going into the depths of nothingness. What does that have to do with anything? What we are trying to do is we're trying to find an intruder. We're trying to find who did this, who snuck into the house, who possibly would have snuck into the house. Because when you say stuff like that, why? It was weird that Priscilla mentioned JonBenet by name for this food. So are you insinuating that Priscilla was trying to poison JonBenet? So there's a lot of these statements that don't lead anywhere. They just try to make people suspects. Everybody's a suspect for no reason. It's like a half-baked theory. I don't even think I can call it half-baked. It's not even, the oven's not even on. All you've done is you've gotten the pot out and set it on the stove. You haven't even turned on, you haven't even put any water in there. You're baking potatoes. You haven't even put any water in the pot and even thought about, peeling potatoes. You've just put the pot on the stove, and that's all you gave me. And this is where John and Patsy want us to just run all over the place and look and do all the work, do all the legwork, which BPD did. Do all the work to actually, okay, oh my God, here's another theory. Well, we got to go get the potatoes. We got to peel the potatoes. We got to wash the potatoes off. We got to put water in the pot. We got to put the potatoes in the pot. We got to wait till it comes to a boil, and then we got to turn it up, comes to a boil. Then we got to do all that stuff. We got to put the spices and the herbs in and stuff like that so that they can bake properly. I hope I'm not making anybody hungry. I'm just saying, using this as an example. But we got to do all these things in order to figure out what's going on. And while we said before, as we've said in other analysis, Patsy and John can just sit back and have somebody else do the work. Like when the BPD spent, I think, about $1.6 million over 2 or 3 years on this. They spent $1.6 million on this. A significant part of their budget, if I remember correctly, of the police budget. Pretty good amount. Pretty good number of agents. Pretty high amount of overtime on this that they dedicated to this project. While John and Patsy just throw random people out there and they just sit back and say, well, how about, because that's easy. All I have to do, if I'm in John and Patsy's position, all I have to do is just sit back and say, well, have you checked out so-and-so? Well, what's the theory on that? They used to work with me. They might be jealous. Because I'm a cop, I have to go over and I have to go talk to this individual, and I have to come up with a whole set of questions. Where were you this night? Where were you in this? Can anybody vouch for this? That is, in fact, taking away time to be solving this thing. That's the thing that John complains about. Oh, these people they're focusing on us, and they're giving time for the killer to get away. How? Wouldn't you? We can argue. We can make a legitimate argument that you're doing the same thing by sending me in a direction that has nothing to do with anything. There's half-baked theories, quarter-baked. Let's call it quarter-baked. These quarter-baked theories that don't lead to anywhere. Gloria, the mistress that John used to have. She was she was in Georgia. How would how would Gloria do this? But, and you go chase Gloria down for what? Why? That's wasting time. And then you mentioned Jim Marino. Jim was like, yo, I never see you. Why would I do this? We never hang out. I never see you, bro. Why would I do this? That does not make sense. And it's like, well, what about Jeff? Jeff is like, man, come on, man. We grew up together. We came up in business together. Come on, man. Why would you? There's no theory. Well, what about Santa Bill? He just had heart surgery. Why would he hoist himself up in a window that's too high? What about Linda? Why would Linda do this? Linda is the most knowledgeable of the house. Linda would have escaped out of the back door. She would have escaped out of the butler door. Why would Linda do this? Linda's probably at home asleep or enjoying time with her family. Can you give me somebody that's legitimate, that we can legitimately look at? But because it's the cop's job, they got to look at everybody. And so it seems strange, and we ask why. But the main question is about JonBenet Ramsey being hungry, and Patsy doesn't remember feeding JonBenet after pancakes at breakfast. And that seems like a long time for a 6-year-old to go without food, as we just mentioned. Patsy stated that the kids don't come, the kids don't care about, and she was saying this to be fair. She said the kids don't care about eating, and she said that with respect to breakfast when they were talking with they were talking about Christmas time, opening the presents at Christmas time, and basically saying, "Hey, did you guys get the kids anything to eat prior to um, prior to opening the presents?" And Patsy was like, "They don't care about eating," and I get that. I respect that. I take that answer. Kids don't care about eating. When you put something else in front of them that they want, they don't care about anything else but that thing. So I get that. That makes sense. But then you feed them pancakes, and at some point though, when my niece and my nephew were smaller though, and they would want to sit down and play with toys, and they didn't want to eat, and my niece would sit with her back and to us, and she would face the TV or whatever she wanted to do, and we'd let her do her thing for a while, but then we say, "Look, babe, you have to eat food," and she would and she'd want to get up and want to run over. Hey, your food is over here on the table, and she'd want to kind of huff and puff and then run over. And we're not going to turn the TV off. You can still watch TV. You can still watch Doc McStuffins. That's not going to change. But you need to come eat. And so she would run over to the TV, really, run over to the table really quickly, and just kind of be eating. Nothing changed. So kids are like that. Kids are like that. They don't want to eat, but you have to kind of force them to eat at times and say, "Look, it's been 3 hours. It's time for a snack. You want a snack? Oh, I don't want anything. Well, come. You look. I made you some apples. Come eat a couple apples," kind of deal. And so for the kids, and I think, like I said, it was around 11 a.m. when they got done eating and making pancakes. So for the kids to go hours without food, without a snack, that seemed a little suspect to me. To me, it seems a little suspect, because I believe that at this point, they would be starving, they would be complaining, right? And so I think a lot of times for kids like this, you have snack time, just a little snack of this and that. You have snack time. They want to go get some water or something like that. And so I believe this was something that was Patsy could kind of be, you know, she'd kind of give the kids a little bit of their own, because JonBenet was 6, and I mentioned before, uh, JonBenet is essentially 4 feet tall, I think, at this time, and Burke is almost 5 feet tall, I think, at this time. So Burke is, I think, maybe tall enough. Burke is tall enough to maybe get his own stuff. JonBenet would need some help, unless, and she may not have the strength to pull the refrigerator door, maybe, but she would need some help. But anyways, may or may not have the strength to pull the refrigerator door. But there's a little bit of autonomy that you give to the kids to go, get their own snacks. If you set snacks out or what have you, it's a little bit of autonomy that you give to them to do their own thing. And so from there, they can eat some snacks and stuff like that, and then you get them ready to go to Fleet White's house. And then from there, if Priscilla brings over some food, then that's fine. So she mentions that, the kids don't like to eat after opening gifts. But as I noted, as I did not find in the transcripts, no pineapple was served before breakfast, and no pineapple was served on the night of Christmas Eve, according to Patsy. And even if it was served on Christmas Eve, it would have been gone out of her stomach anyway. So that doesn't matter. But they didn't serve it on Christmas Eve. They didn't serve it at breakfast time, which means that It's telling us that and Patsy is helping us to understand. So we were kind of speculating that maybe the pineapple had been sitting out days prior. Well, Patsy is telling us, if we go by what Patsy is saying, well, no, we didn't have any Christmas Eve. That wasn't there Christmas Eve. Okay. And I said, well, what about breakfast? When you get up in the morning? No, that wasn't at breakfast. And essentially what you're telling me is, we didn't put it there, and we had pancakes, so we wouldn't have had a reason to put it there. And so till about 11, at least till about 11 a.m., that bowl was not there. So it had to be served, or somebody had to have pineapple in the afternoon part of Christmas Day, is what you're telling us. Thank you, because we can kind of track that. And so, according to Christmas Eve, and then at Christmas Eve, according to Patsy, they went to Pasta J's after church. I guess they had some sort of Christmas Eve program or something like that at St. John's, and then after that, they went to Pasta J's after church and didn't see any issues in terms of what have you. Moving on to the next point. Fleet goes on to say, it says, what happens is that evil comes in. Fleet says, if you don't have truth, all you have are lies. Then then what comes in is evil, and evil just does its thing. In the Ramsey case, it just did its thing, and it's eaten up so many people. So Fleet says here, um, if you don't have truth, you have lies, then what follows is evil, and evil just does its thing. In the Ramsey case, evil just did its thing, signifying that what we were made to believe is not true. Essentially telling on his friend a little bit, telling on John a little bit, and admitting he doesn't have any proof, but he says, man, look, man, evil is present. I want to go back just a second, though. I want to go back to the fruit cocktail thing, and I wasn't going to dive into the transcripts here, but I think I do want to dive into the transcripts, especially about the fruit cocktail. Some discussion about the fruit cocktail from John Ramsey, saying it was served at the party. Fleet, according to John, says, according to the John transcript, or according to what John says, he does not remember serving pineapple, so it's hard to say what she ate, but it definitely wasn't cracked crab, and it was definitely served hours prior to her death. So it wouldn't be the cracked crab, but maybe the fruit cocktail. So let me try to see if I can't pull up the 97 transcripts, or 98. Okay, so in terms of what was mentioned, obviously the cracked crab, like we said, but it goes on to talk about little finger foods, sort of stating all sorts of finger foods at the White House, and they kind of ask him about it. And I think this is coming from the 98 interview with Lou Smith. Says, do you remember, and this is talking about the party, you ask him, do you remember any fruit like apples, oranges, anything like that? He says, not specifically. I know we've been asked about pineapples a lot directly, in which he kind of trails off into kind of this frustration with Lou Smith over these pineapples when Lou kind of pressed him about it. But he says, yeah, and Lou says, I was going to get around to that. And John says, okay, yeah, it wouldn't have been unusual. And so this is interesting because John brings up the pineapple. Now, even though he acknowledges that Fleet White said that they didn't have pineapple, or Fleet White said that he doesn't remember having pineapple, John is trying to force Fleet into this narrative, or force a pineapple to have been at Fleet's house. He says, yeah, that wouldn't have been unusual. That would have certainly fit in with the dinner, but I don't specifically remember being there. I don't specifically remember being there, but I can tell you there were some finger foods, probably some carrots and celery and whatnot. And so, again, this half-baked theory that pineapple was there, quarter-baked, that pineapple was there, and just kind of throwing it out there that, you guys have been asking me and asking us about pineapple, and I can't say for sure if it was there or not. Then if you can't say for sure, then why are you talking to me about that? Why are you mentioning stuff that you cannot say for sure? You guys keep doing that. You guys keep throwing people's names in the hat that you're not sure about. You keep on throwing theories out there that you're not sure about. Why do you feel comfortable doing that? What is making you feel comfortable? He was talking to Mike Kane about, I think, why they took so long to come in or have a discussion. And he goes on to say in these interview transcripts that, hey, we invited Commander Eller over to the house to have a conversation. And Commander Eller said, I'm not going in there. That would be in their territory, and I'm not doing that. And John said, well, essentially, I'm not going into, this lynch mob, and I'm not. It seems like you guys just want to crucify us, is essentially what he was saying. And he said, well, what can we do? Well, you can go down to the police station with you and your half-baked theories, so we can ask you questions without you squirming and without you running around and getting out of it. And so he mentions, okay, there's like little finger foods and stuff like that. There's celery and carrots and celery. Um, don't mention anything like that. I don't remember carrots and celery, finger foods and stuff. In terms of peanuts, John mentions that they usually had peanuts around. This is coming from, again, the 1998 interview. Um, Kids were playing with their toys and mentioned getting down and playing with some beads. But with JonBenet, I think Fleet and John got down to play with. I think Priscilla had put out some beads or something like that. And John and Fleet, who he calls Pete, got down there with Daphne and JonBenet to make some beads or something like that. So anyways, he goes on to say, hey, there was usually some peanuts around or something like that. And so all of these things are being used to kind of say that this was in her system. Asking, now you've heard about the pineapple. He says, I don't know if the police asked us whether we saw it on television, but I remember that question coming up a lot. It's sort of been a very logical hors d'oeuvres. I don't remember specifically if it was there. I think that part of the question was, what did she eat? That's where it came from. Goes to the next part of the interview. Even the pineapple, yes, it was in the bowl. Yeah, and we haven't talked much about this, but you've heard about this in regards to your daughter and the pineapples in her system and hearing it on television. Next part, could have been something that looks like pineapple. Okay. Answer comes. I think, yeah, this is John's interview. It's coming from 2000 interview with Patsy. All right, so John never told you that Lou Smith told him that it was definitely pineapple. Patsy says, no, John. It's like they go home and don't even talk to each other about this. That's him. What? Okay, so no, John never told me that. Lou Smith definitely confirmed that it was pineapple. Question comes, have you, whether it was pineapple or any other type of fruit, is it your understanding that you haven't asked any forensic experts or gastroenterologists or someone of that nature, someone with a medical background, what their opinion of this was? That would be important. And as a parent, you would be asking about all of these things, like, what is this? Can you guys tell us more about this? That's in, because we're struggling with this in an investigation, and it makes me question, what the heck, when you find this out, what the heck were Haddon Morgan and Foreman looking at then? If you have investigators on the ground, what exactly are you looking at? If you're supposed to be analyzing what's going on in the case and analyzing what was said, what your client was saying in the police interviews, and you have all these experts that are talking about the ransom note, it seems like the experts are largely around picking off the DNA, picking off the ransom note, untying you to the DNA, untying you from the ransom note, and those focal points. But when it gets to this stuff, like a thorough investigation, they're not even talking about, or so they tell us. Heard about this in terms of the tabloids. And so he goes on to say, well, I don't know. John is saying, well, I don't know. Then I guarantee you it was not when she came home, talking about eating the pineapple. It's not when she came home. She was sound asleep. So it had to be at the Whites or prior to that. Okay. Lou Smith says, okay, now when you say it wouldn't be afterwards, I mean, now that's why, this is going to be blah, 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 the question that's going to be asked. John Ramsey says she was sound asleep. And so here we kind of see John getting defensive and he's kind of shooting back. Now, Lou is his friend. Lou believes him, but he's just having to ask questions. But this is where we start to see John get hostile because he repeats himself and he says, "Oh, she was sound asleep. Couldn't have been." And then Lou says, "Well, as an investigator, as a detective, we got to start dealing with this. You say it was afterwards. Do you know this is going to be what they ask and everything?" So this is not about Lou. Lou is saying this is not about me. I'm not asking you this question because I'm trying to convict you of anything, or I'm trying to say that you did or accuse you of anything. I'm asking you because this is what everybody wants to know. That's all. That's why I'm asking. John says she was sound asleep when I carried her upstairs. Okay. I mean, I noted when I got her out of the car and I struggled to get her out of the back seat, and she was just, I almost dropped her. I kind of struggled to get her up in my arms. Why? She's 45 pounds. Why are you struggling? She's asleep. Kind of struggled to get her up in my arms, and it didn't phase her, and she didn't wake up. She was just out. And this is useless information. Why would you struggle to get a 45-pound child in your arms if you're John? Why would you struggle with that? How? Now, I understand kids can be sleeping at some sort of awkward angle. What you should have said, if what we would have liked to know, or what would have been applicable information, is she was sleeping awkwardly in the back of the car. I mean, she was supposed to be sleeping in her seat, like straight up, but JonBenet sleeps weird. She was sleeping sideways, and I tried to pick her up, and just her whole body just went like this weirdly limp thing. And so, like, as I tried to pick her up without waking her up, I only got like from her waist down. And from there, I thought I had a good grip on her to kind of readjust her when I got her in my arms, but she almost fell. But that's not what John says. He makes this random story about how JonBenet he struggled to get her out of the back seat, and he almost dropped her. I struggled to get her up in my arms. Why? That's what we would want to know. Why did you struggle? You would tell us that part instead of telling us, "Oh man, yeah, I just almost dropped her. She was sound asleep, almost dropped her." But what he's stopping short of telling us why, because all he's trying to prove is that how asleep she was. And what he's trying to get us to believe, I think what he's trying to suggest here, is that JonBenet was so asleep that she was not going to get up for any circumstances, for any reason. But somehow, some way, if JonBenet is this sleep, then you're suggesting to me that JonBenet would have been asleep during the assault. Is what it seems like you're telling me. She would have been asleep during the assault. If she's sleeping this hard to where you almost drop her and you jolt her and yank her, then are you trying to suggest to me that she would have been asleep during the assault? Or maybe she would have been asleep during somebody picking her up and taking her downstairs if she's sleeping that hard. If she's sleeping hard enough to use the restroom on herself, and what you're saying, that she very seldom gets up and goes to Burke's room or does anything, she just lays in bed until morning and sleeps through this, what you're suggesting to me is that this kid can sleep through anything. That's what you're saying to me. But then all of a sudden, when she gets down to the assault, then she would wake up, or this person picking her up and taking her downstairs, then she would wake up and be alive through the assault. And then with the rope around her body, her head region, let me say it like that, with the rope around her head region, then she would wake up and be fully engaged and fully active. If JonBenet is as asleep as we expect her to be, I would expect there to be some grogginess. Because when it's hard for kids to wake up like that, it's hard to wake them up. Now, they do wake up, but man, sometimes when you wake a kid like that up, you can see their eyes rolling in the back of their head. And I'm not saying JonBenet wouldn't have, woken up, and been like, "Oh, what the heck is going on? Where does this rope come from?" I'm not saying that wouldn't the case, but I've tried to wake up kids like that. And when they're out like that, it's hard for them to come to ever. So it's if JonBenet woke up after the assault, or if JonBenet woke up after or during the assault or whatever, you have to try to understand when the rope came into play. Because if the individual came in for the assault, where did the rope come into play? Because if she wakes up, she has to make a determination or a decision about where her hands go first. If I'm feeling some sort of uncomfortableness down low, then I have to attend to that. But I also have a rope around my neck that, I got to figure out. And so apparently the rope is so tight that immediately my body says, go up here. And so I'm scratching so hard that I'm trying to get at the rope. And that's kind of really sad to talk about. But she's having to make a decision. And you're telling me this child has been asleep all this time, and all of a sudden she comes to. And so you're essentially trying to get me to believe that this entire time JonBenet was asleep. Well, if JonBenet slept this hard, then why would anyone need a stun gun to put her back to sleep? Make that make sense. If JonBenet was sleeping this hard, and you told me that, that's a critical piece to me. If you said that no matter what you did, JonBenet stayed asleep, because that's contradicting now, isn't it? If JonBenet stayed asleep through all of that, you said she sleeps like a rock. I tried to get her up, and I had her, kind of, cattywampus almost. She was like weirdly, kind of in my hands, and I'm trying to get her, and she slept right through it. Oh, really? But then all of a sudden she woke up when an intruder came in the room. You almost dropped her. That's a jolt. Boom. That's a jolt. You almost dropped her, but you got her back up, and so she yanked forward. You got her up, and then you walked into the garage or whatever you did, and you took her upstairs, laid her in bed, changed her clothes, put her to bed, and read her a story, and read a story to a child that wasn't even awake. That's what I'm saying. If JonBenet was sleeping like a rock, why would you read her a bedtime story? If you didn't even turn on the light, why would you read her a bedtime story? And here's another critical piece. How would you read her a bedtime story in the dark, without a flashlight or a nightlight? How would you read her a bedtime story in the dark? Patsy said it was dark, and I didn't want to wake her up. Well, she was already asleep then, and she wouldn't wake up. So what parent, please help me understand, what parent would sit down and read to their child a bedtime story in the dark? And this is where I have to start asking questions and going deep into the questioning and the interrogation process of the facts. You said that it was dark, and you said the light wasn't on, but we found pictures with the lights on. Like you said, you read to her. Where was the book? I don't recount any book being on any dresser. Where was the book? You said you put her in bed. Why were the sheets pulled back that far? That's not somebody that the sheets weren't pulled back as if that's somebody who like woke up and got out of bed. That the sheets were pulled back as if, somebody helped somebody remove something. And we talked about Patsy would have only went over there to those stairs out of her way if she was going to check on JonBenet. Where's the melatonin? You said you took melatonin. Where is it? I just want to check and see if you even had any melatonin in the house. Oh, why would anybody lie about that? I don't know. But one of the things you said you took melatonin, I would suspect that they recovered melatonin from your house, among other things. I don't know why you would lie about anything, but I just want to know where the melatonin is. I want to know where the book is that's supposed to be somewhere around here. Where's the book that you said you read to her? How would you have read to her? In the dark. Why would you? Oh, some people can see in the dark. Why would you be reading to somebody in the dark? Number one. Number two, why would you be reading a book to somebody who you know is out like a light? You only read to kids when they won't go to sleep. That's counterintuitive. Which makes me think it suggests to me that you did not read her a book. Why would you lie about that? What, for what? There's no need, and that's what I'm saying. This is useless information. To even talk to me about, we read her a book for bedtime. We put her to bed and read her a book. It's hard for me to believe that. And it puts all of everything else that you're saying in doubt for me. And it's almost like I can't trust your version of events at all. Because what you're doing is you're trying to frame, you're going up to the line, and it's like you're almost going up to the point to where you formally accuse someone and then you back off. There could have been peanuts. That wouldn't have been out of the question. There could have been pineapples at the party. That certainly would have fit within. Well, Fleet White already said that there were no pineapples. That's your friend, right? Don't you trust him? That's your boy, right? Don't you trust him? He said there were no pineapples. Says almost dropped her. Next question, could somebody have gotten her up and fed her pineapples? I mean, that's a logical question and whatnot. What if it was a stranger? And John says, what if it was a stranger? And then Lou Smith says, well, it was. Had to be. And then John says, had to be. What are we doing here? What are we talking about? John says, what if it was a stranger who fed her? A stranger who fed her, John? Name to me the times when that's happened in the house. How many times? What are the cases? Very seldom. Number one, unless they take them out of the house or unless nobody else is at the home. Number one. Number two, John says, what if it was a stranger? That question is kind of telling because Lou Smith has to come back and remind him it was a stranger. Right? It was a stranger, correct? I mean, we were on the same page in that. It was a stranger, right? Certainly it was. Wasn't it? It's almost like you're being coached through the interview. You're being coached through the process. Well, it was a stranger. Patsy's interview, I think in 1998. That's weird. Tom says, would John do that? Patsy says, no. Tom says, how about Burke? Patsy says, no. He has a sweet tooth. He doesn't like fruit much. He likes pineapple a bit, strawberries a little bit, but he wouldn't pour himself a big bowl of pineapple. It says, Tom says, if he got up in the middle of the night, would he eat something like that? Patsy says, no. He would eat something chocolate. Tom says, okay, could he reach the bowl? Patsy says, he could reach the bowl. How about the spoon? Where was it kept? She says, yeah, the silverware drawer in the kitchen to the right of the range. But see, if the kids were making a snack for themselves, even if they were, that's a huge serving spoon. They use little. They would use a little spoon. Now, I don't know if some of those women, Priscilla and them were there that morning. It was early, and I don't know whether they were, fixing things for people to eat. But that doesn't look right to me. Oh, she calls Priscilla that woman. Okay. Patsy goes, I don't know, but it doesn't look right to me. Goes on to say, Tom says, when's the last time JonBenet ate pineapple? Patsy says, I don't know. Tom says, there were remains of pineapple in her system. Patsy says, I heard that, yeah. Tom says, this is not a shock to you? Patsy says, no, it's not. No. Tom says, okay. Patsy says, but I did not do it. If she ate that, somebody put that there. And she says, I don't know when she would have eaten it. She was sound asleep when we got home. Tom says, and you said earlier, you cleaned the table off after breakfast. Patsy says, and he says, and she says, yes, she confirms that. And Tom says, that wasn't there. And Patsy says, no, it wasn't. Tom says, is there a way to account for pineapple in her body? This is in the 98 interview. Now Patsy's getting hostile with the cops. I'm just asking you. You said that this wasn't there after breakfast. This is what you said. I didn't say anything. This is what you said. And you're getting hostile with me. I told you it wasn't there. Are you not surprised that your daughter has pineapple in her system? You should be. You should be surprised that there's pineapple in your daughter's system because you didn't put it there. Why is that not unusual to you? You should be saying that's quite if anything's weird, you should be saying this is quite unusual because I didn't feed her that. So absolutely, yeah, that should surprise you. The only way it shouldn't surprise you is if you know somebody who could have given her the pineapple, and it's normal for her to have pineapple in her system. Maybe if she ate a snack or something like that after breakfast, and somebody could have given her that snack that you know. That's the only way possible. You should be very surprised. So I'm saying Patsy shouldn't be talking at all. Another interview from Patsy, 99, another part of the interview. Can't recall where it came from. I can't recall putting that there. I can never recall putting a tea bag like that in a cup. So I don't know. I don't know the answer. Tom says, have you, in the course of the last 18 months, talked to any pathologists or read any reports about pineapple in a body or how long it takes for a body to digest materials? Patsy says, no. What the heck are y'all doing then? Over the past almost 2 years, what have y'all been doing? Have you been asking any questions about anything to anyone? They are mentioning very specific people, and that's what I'm saying. If you have lawyers who have experts of their own, what questions are they asking? Because it seems like they ain't asking nothing. They ain't asking the right questions. Because now I have to ask you what your protection is of. You have investigators of your own, and what are they investigating? Are you investigating to protect John and Patsy, or are you investigating for real solid tips on how we can find JonBenet? Because if that's the case, you would have been talking to a pathologist about how things got in her stomach because you are aware of these things. You know these things. They're in the tabloids. Somebody, as John mentioned, somebody came up and talked to him about it. So why have you not been asking these experts about this part? You're asking to disprove the ransom note, but you're not asking about, well, why would this end up in my daughter's body? How could it have gotten there? What would be the case? That shows a level of disinterest in the case. Why? And people are going to say, because you already knew the answer. Well, how can you blame them? Because this is a clear opportunity for you to be interested and be involved in your daughter's case. I know it's hard. I know it's tough. I know you're sad about the memory of your daughter. I get all that. But what I'm saying is this is an opportunity to honor the memory of your daughter by finding this criminal. And instead of jumping on television and just pointing random people out and saying this monster, that monster, and this, that, and the third, you have an opportunity to say what we've done is we've looked at some of the pathologists. We've talked to pathologists. We talked to other medical professionals about this. And what they've told us is this or whatever. Not going like John is saying, oh, this person has a pretty good theory. No. Have you talked to these people about what specifically the autopsy report is telling us? And if we can get to it, because that could be helpful. So you're telling us, and it's a good question by Tom, about about how long it takes for it to digest, because they hit John with a question like that, and he was kind of he didn't know. Well, I think John hit somebody with a question like that. He said, what he started asking about the digestive pattern. And I was like, oh. So Patsy says, no, I just have heard. And Patrick Burke comes in. That is in the answers. Uh, he's not trying to evade the attorney-client privilege or um, or work product. He said he is asking you independent of, and Tom Haney says, right, not anything you got from Mr. Burke or Mr. Furman. Patsy says, no. So basically, you didn't, not from what your attorneys told you. So you said you heard it from somebody, but where'd you hear it from? Well, I didn't hear it from my lawyers. I just know that I heard it somewhere. There was a pineapple in her stomach. Could be the tabloids or what have you. And so I know you're aware of it, but it didn't spark your, and that's what I'm saying. If come on, man, come on. If you're a parent and somebody says something about your child after they're gone and stuff, after they passed away, and somebody comes up with something, there are parents who fight to the death when somebody tries to make a claim. You've seen it in the news about celebrities and stuff like that. I recently, maybe several months ago, his dancer called Stephen Twitch Boss, and he passed away. Um, and his wife was coming back and saying some stuff that the mother didn't agree with, and she was going off. You're not about to say that about my son. You're not about to put that stuff out there about my son. And so basically, I would expect a parent to react in the any other parent who has lost a child to react in the same way. If you hear something, some news about your child, you're going to perk up and say, well, wait, what? You said there's pineapple in her stomach. So we went in because it's natural human curiosity that's going to draw you to look up some stuff. And you're going to go and say, man, I've been hearing about this pineapple that the tabloids have been talking about. What's going on? Can we put somebody on that? But Patsy's saying, no, I didn't want to. I didn't want to research that. I didn't. You didn't care? Did you not care? No, I just heard that it happened. And Tom, because that was in the autopsy report. So there's got to be some truth to it, right? If I'm remembering correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. That was in the autopsy report. Right. And again, I'm no scientist or anything, Tom says, but from what we're told, pineapple goes in in at an X time and certain amount of time later, it's gone. Correct. Okay. It goes through a particular process. And there's a way to estimate times based on that, depending on where it is in the body. Absolutely. Police bungling, huh? These are questions that I'm asking. These are questions that you're asking. What's the process? So it's going through the stomach and then it's going into the small intestine. Now it's being caught in the upper small intestine. How long does it take to go from the stomach? How long does pineapple take to go from the stomach to the small intestine? And what does that tell us about how long she's been dead? If you have some remnants of sort of like that mucus, some remnants of the tannish green substance, still a little bit, some remnants in her stomach, a little bit of that substance in her stomach, but most of it has transitioned over into her upper small intestine. You see what I'm saying? We've looked at that stuff. And this ain't even our kid. This is John and Patsy. So I'm not a scientist or anything, but we're trying to estimate that process. And then Patsy says when she would have eaten it, so you can tell me somewhere in there. And Patsy's asking them. She's asking them on spot. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? And so Tom says, yes, we are. That's what we're trying to estimate. Essentially, Patsy says, working on that. Okay. So what time did she eat this? Wouldn't you like to know? Now we see you're fishing. You're fishing for information. Okay. You're fishing for information from me. You want to know what I know. And this is why we can't tell you anything. This is why when John and Patsy go try to talk to the police don't want to talk to them about anything. Because you're fishing. You're not coming to give answers. You're coming to fish for answers. You're supposed to know this. This is your daughter. This is what you're supposed to know. You're supposed to find this stuff out. But you're saying, well, what did you find? Oh. Some of you have mentioned, I didn't hear it. I got to be honest. But some of you have mentioned in the enhanced version of the 911 call, you guys are saying that it sounds like a little boy or a child's voice on the recording saying, "What did you find?" On like some of the enhanced versions, and some other experts have said that as well. I just don't hear it. Could be that I'm bad at hearing. I'm just saying I don't hear it. But some of you have mentioned, "What did you find?" But if that was the case, this is essentially what Patsy's saying. Now you're piquing Patsy's interest. And Patsy she has to break character for a little bit. Because now she's saying, "You've intrigued me. Nobody else is here. It's just me and you. What did you find?" She really wants to know. I really want to know in terms of the investigation going on, and maybe some things that I know, maybe I know that you don't know. What did you find? What are you getting at? Because if you come back and let's speculate and say, and I'm just suggesting some sort of random theory, what if it's the case that they say, from what we found, what we can tell is that JonBenet was killed at 11:05. That could tell you, and that could tell Patsy whether or not investigators are getting closer or further away from the truth, whether you're getting warmer or colder. And then from there, I have to go home. If I've done something wrong, from there, I would have to, or an individual would have to go home and communicate to their specific other. Specific other, random individual who is my spouse. I was in an interview today, and the police asked me about this. And according to what we know about the case, this is the time that they found that JonBenet was dead. Now, this is what this means for us. That could be a conversation later on. So Patsy is no longer, she's intrigued. It's like a childhood curiosity that comes out of her, and she's intrigued. What did you find? So you're working on that. What did you come up with? Tom Haney says, "Well, I'm not at liberty to discuss that part right now with you." Patsy says, "Okay," and Patsy says, "All right. Do you do where we know this is what so this is what she ate. We know that this is what she ate." And Tom says, "We're pretty sure it was pineapple." And then Patsy Ramsey says, "This pineapple?" And Tom says, "Well, I don't think that science has come quite that far that you could say this pineapple." Patsy says, "I mean, can they tell whether it was fresh or canned?" Tom says, "Well," Patsy says, "because canned, it's like gooey, And Tom says, "There's some different consistency, but I don't know. But what concerns me is how that bowl with that pineapple got there, and how the pineapple got in JonBenet's system." And Patsy says, "I don't know truly." Look at this line of look at this response. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Look at this one. Haha. I know where you are. Not gonna get away from me. Oh no, here it is. It's up here. Why are you doing that? You are trying to get it. You try. All right. I'll try to tell you. Let's just okay. I'll just say this. I mean, can they tell whether or not it was fresh or canned? Why? Why would you be asking that question? Why would you be asking me? And this is in the 1998 interview, by the way, with Patsy. And this is from, you can find this on candyrose.com if you want to look through this. Why would you be asking me that question, Patsy? Can they tell whether it was fresh or canned? Does that matter? What kind of pineapple was in her system? Fresh or canned? Because it's funny because John said they had canned pineapples. She's like, "Oh, because if you can tell that, then it's kind of gooey." Let me tell you something. maybe the kind of pineapples can tell us something, right? Because it tells you about who you're talking to. Patsy said Burke would have gotten something chocolate. He likes to eat junk food. I gotta go back and find that interview to remember what Burke said. But he said, well, I'm not going to speculate on what he said. I can't really remember what he said, so I got to go back and find that interview. But Patsy mentioned something to the effect of she likes to get the pineapples from Safeway, and whatever store you go to, whatever grocery store you go to, you know that they cut up pineapple, and they put it in like a little container. John mentioned canned pineapples, so the canned pineapples would be associated with John. But then the fresh pineapples would be associated with Patsy. And if we're looking at fresh pineapples in a bowl, then that would mean our first thought, if we're investigating, would be that John, as a father, as somebody who may not be as involved or concerned about their child's health or being health conscious, would go and get the gooey pineapples. He would notice the gooey pineapples because he's not as health conscious as the mother. The mother says, oh, I don't mind gooey pineapples, but I want my kids eating fresh fruit. John mentions bananas hanging up, in their house and having grapes and stuff like that. I believe that Patsy is the head of this, going and getting fresh fruit. And if this can be applied to Patsy, then the fresh fruit might triangulate more to Patsy. And that could tell you possibly Patsy served these pineapples. Can we back that up with facts? Yes, because her fingerprints are on the bowl and the cup. She served one of the two. So you're telling me you didn't see that all day. Well, at some point in time, because your fingerprints are on it. So if that bowl of pineapples was not served on Christmas Eve, because you're locking yourself in, if that bowl of pineapples was not served in the morning, if that bowl of pineapples was not served after breakfast, some point in time, you served your child pineapples or tea, and it was Burke, because y'all's fingerprints are on it. And if that wasn't there prior to 11 a.m., then it was there after 11 a.m. I got to lock you down. So we know nothing happened prior to 11 a.m., according to what you told me. But your fingerprints come up on this. And we know it wasn't Christmas Eve. And we know that you're aware that you cleaned the table off and that wasn't there. With y'all's fingerprints on this, at some point in time, both of y'all put y'all's hands on this bowl after 11 a.m. We know that for a fact. And we know that y'all put y'all's hands on this bowl and this cup, this glass of tea, prior to 5:45 a.m. on the 26th of December. So somewhere between December 25th, 11 a.m. and December 26th, 5:45 a.m., y'all were interacting with this pineapple and this tea. So from there, you cannot be excluded because you two triangulate. You and Burke triangulate around something after 11 a.m. And now that you asked me about fresh pineapples, you told me that you buy fresh pineapple from Safeway. Told me where you got it. So you would be more inclined, and now you're asking me specifically about it, unprompted. Nobody told you to ask about that, but I got you. I got you. I intrigued you. And this is what I'm talking about, little things. Pat Burke wouldn't have known to say, stop talking about that. He wouldn't have known because it seems meaningless. And there's so much information coming out that you can't catch everything. That's the good thing about humans. There's so much information coming out that if you're a lawyer or attorney, you're trying to catch it, you can't. It's going too fast. Can't remember everything. I got 20 million other cases that I got to focus on as well. If I want to be on top of my game, I got to focus on that. But that's why you have a separate HMF for John. You have had Morgan and Foreman for John, but then you have Pat Burke and I think Armstead for Patsy, so they can focus specifically on Patsy and keep Patsy. But the problem comes when your lawyers don't talk, or when your lawyers have to part time, when your lawyers don't communicate with each other, when your teams don't communicate with each other as they should. Because lawyers share information. They get together in their little groups and they call over the phone, email, whatever they do, get together in rooms and share information. I've been a part of those conversations, stuff like that, share information. But maybe you're missing some things that you didn't note. And stuff like this slips through the cracks to where now you're helping me close down the timeline and you don't even know it. Now we're getting somewhere, because I caught you in saying, well, there's some sort of issue that we know she got the pineapple and we know it got in her system. Patsy says, well, I truly don't know. She didn't have anything. She's not interested. She's not asking any questions about, hey, in terms of, and look at the kind of questions she's asked. She's not asking about, hey, this is crazy. That's wild. Because Tom is like, that doesn't surprise you that somebody fed your daughter pineapples? All Patsy says, well, what was it, the fresh kind or the gooey kind? And he says, well, there's some different consistency, but I don't know. And Patsy says, well, because if it's canned, it's gooey. That don't mean nothing. Yeah. Yeah. That is helpful. I kind of want to keep going because there's a lot more, because John is saying that it's possible. He's trying his hardest to push it off at the White party, at Fleet and Priscilla White's party, trying to push it off then. But what we have to account for is that somewhere between 11 a.m. that same day and later on, say what you said, you said 9 p.m. because you said 9 p.m. according to what you said. Somewhere between 11 a.m. that day on the 25th of December, according to what you said, 9 p.m., JonBenet had some pineapple. Now, what you could tell me is, well, yeah, during the interim, she had pineapple. Oh, that's what I did want to, because she said Burke was just eating chocolate.
But that's not happening. So, I mean, what are the chances of that happening?
Is there anything about that night, if you can remember, anything in the night?
I don't remember everything. Because I was sleeping. I always sleep a little bit and remember everything.
Would you have certain
Now, what we can tell here is that he's saying that he never went downstairs because he sleeps real deeply, but then we know that later on he went on Dr. Phil and kind of contradicted himself, because right here he's saying he slept real deeply that night, but now he's coming back and saying that, or on here he's saying he slept real deeply, but then he went back on Dr. Phil and said that he slept or he woke up that night and went downstairs. So I mean, clearly that's a direct contradiction from what he said previously.
How about the last year you looked at you looked at her? What was your normal routine? Would you snack before you went to bed?
I might not usually.
You guys snack, or mom and chat. Pretty yogurt. Some parents like kids have cookies, candy, cereal, fruit, things like that.
Yeah, she was just fruit.
So what kind of foods would you typically have?
Like pineapple.
Yeah, do you like that?
Yeah.
Is that your favorite fruit? What would you try to make your favorite snack?
We have.
What about that? Just like that?
So I think Detective Commander Eller, I think he led him a little bit. You know, he led him a little bit. You could be accused of that, you know, leading him a little bit, but then maybe not, because you just, you know, you mentioned out other things. You said he does stay consistent with Patsy in that, you know, I like chocolate. You know, she said chocolate. He said, you know, maybe chocolate pudding or something like that. So that's consistent in that. But when it comes to talking about the pineapple, he says, I like pineapple. Huh. We know you do, because we've seen the pictures. He can't get away from that. But he just says the only thing is, you know, I like to eat it. If I were to get a snack, I didn't get a snack that night, but if I were to get a snack, it probably wouldn't have been pineapple. And you know who's going to recommend pineapple to me? It's going to be my mom. So if I get up late at night and guess what? I want to eat a snack and I say, Mom, can you please get me some, can you please get me a snack? And I say, you know what? I want some sugar. Mom's going to say, absolutely not, mister. We're going to give you some fruit and you're going to go back to bed. You got it? Because it's possible that she called him up at nighttime and he said, you know what? We'll go, I'll take the fruit. And she recommended him the fruit because John said something to the effect of, oh, it probably would have been in some saran wrap or something like that. So while, and I'll close it off here, and, you know, like I said, man, got a lot more to go. While we are being led to believe that it was possible that this was going to be at Fleet's house, while we are being led to believe that this is going to be at Fleet's house, it's also extremely possible that it's going to be at the Ramsey house. I mean, even if we think about it, I was going back in the transcripts, even if we think about it and we say, okay, well, maybe what about grapes and things of that nature? What about a fruit cocktail or what have you? Well, if you talk about green grapes, it would have had to be green grapes if it was anything else. And you had grapes at your house. We don't have any recollection or mention of any grapes at Fleet's house. If it was an apple, it would have had to have been a green apple. In order to achieve that yellowish tan color, maybe that could be greenish looking, it would have had to be at your house. Still, green grapes or green apples, that would have had to be at your house, period. So we have some contradictions coming through centered around that pineapple, where Patsy, can you see some similarities between Patsy and her firstborn? They're both very, very curious. Burke saying, I'm laying in bed and I'm listening. People come in my room, I don't move. John is like, oh, absolutely not. He stayed asleep all night. When he said that on Dr. Phil, absolutely not. Stayed asleep all night. Couldn't do it. Stayed asleep all night.
So my dad came in there.
Was Burke in the kitchen when that 911
No.
call was made?
No.
Where was Burke when the 911 call was made?
Well, we checked his bedroom immediately almost in all this chaos, and he was asleep in bed. That is pure fiction.
Asleep in bed. There you go. Burke couldn't have done it. He ain't gonna get up. He ain't gonna feed himself. Ain't nothing gonna happen. Unless, and I gotta find, somebody said there was something about a Dr. Phil interview. I gotta find that Dr. Phil interview where it kind of talks about Burke and JonBenet playing together. Just kind of, and this was at what Burke was saying, which would align well with my theory, because I know they won't tell you at the time, but they'll tell you around the time is what they'll do. So anyways, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting, liking, sharing, and subscribing. Appreciate your support, the love, and the sort of excitement in the community and stuff like that. So I appreciate it. Until next time, take it easy.